Rambo? Dead? And what fate did Marvel really intend for Loki? Here are some of the biggest changes ever made to movies after a test screening. Fatal Attraction remains one of the most successful thrillers of the 1980s, a film that launched Glenn Close into stardom and earned 6 Academy Award nominations. The film is still a memorable, tense psychological thrill ride thanks to the incredible lead performances of Close and Michael Douglas. But according to Close, it was actually originally going to end in an even darker way than it ultimately did. Remember the scene in which Dan goes to Alex's apartment and they fight over a kitchen knife? Well, Alex was supposed to use that moment to get Dan's prints on the knife, which she would then kill herself with and use to frame him for her murder. Test audiences had something else in mind. Close told Movieline, "The original ending was a gorgeous piece of film noir. She kills herself but makes sure that his prints are all over the knife, and he gets arrested. He knows he didn't do it, but he's going to jail anyway." But audiences wanted some kind of cathartic ending. So we went back months later and shot the ending that's in the movie now. A different ending in which Dan and his wife Beth fight Alex until Beth shoots her was added. Test screenings can sway many different aspects of a film's plot, but it's not often that you hear about a film that comes out of the test screening process with a different title. That's exactly what happened to the last James Bond film of the 1980s and Timothy Dalton's second and final outing as Bond, License to Kill. The film was originally titled License Revoked, because that's exactly what happens in the film. Bond becomes a rogue agent as he goes on a quest for vengeance against a drug kingpin who killed his friend's wife shortly after their wedding, and M suspends him and revokes his trademark License to Kill. However, when the film was test screened for American audiences, they were puzzled by the title, as they thought of License Revoked as something that happens to driver's licenses, not a cool secret agency's license to kill, so the title was altered to avoid any confusion.
You could have had everything.
Don't you want to know why?
Scott Pilgrim versus the World and its source material, the Scott Pilgrim graphic novel series by Brian Lee O'Malley, developed simultaneously, with O'Malley releasing the final volume of his story just weeks before Edgar Wright's film hit theaters. That meant Wright & Company did not necessarily have a concrete ending from the source material to go by when they wrote the film, and that meant an ending that created some trouble at test screenings. The original ending of the film featured Scott staying with Knives Chow, his girlfriend in the beginning of the film, rather than being with Ramona Flowers. But according to Wright, this created arguments during the testing process. Wright told Entertainment Weekly, "The way that we'd originally written it, which wasn't quite right, is we were trying to do a Graduate or Heartbreak Kid-style ending. To tell the honest truth, Ellen Wong, who plays Knives, was so lovely and so charming that it just made me feel horrible even doing that ending. So the ending we did have was neither here nor there." When the test screenings didn't go well, Wright, O'Malley, and co-writer Michael Bacall went back and wrote a new ending in which Knives encourages Scott to be with Ramona.
"I'm too cool for you anyway."
A 1980s teen rom-com classic written by John Hughes and directed by Howard Deutsch, Pretty in Pink is an interesting case of test screening changes, in part because you can still experience the original version of the story if you're willing to track down the novelization of the film. The book, you see, was already written by the time the studio requested a new ending from Hughes and Deutsch, following a test screening response in which audiences clearly picked a winner in the battle for Andy's heart. In the film's original ending, Andy actually did come around to falling for her longtime best friend, Ducky, who'd been in love with her the whole time, but test audiences wanted Andy to end up with Blaine, the upper-class guy. Because the novelization is based on the original script, Ducky still gets the girl in the book. But Hughes and Deutsch crafted a new ending in which Blaine apologizes to Andy and Ducky, feeling they should be together, and Ducky vouches for him.
Okay, you're right. He's not like the others.
So if you like that Andy ended up with Blaine, you have early test audiences to thank. Neil Marshall's brutal subterranean horror flick The Descent is a film that changed not so much because of traditional test audiences, but because of the test that was its release in the UK, which happened more than a year before the film finally made its way to the States. The Descent is a relentless, grimy thrill ride full of gore and creature thrills, and its UK ending drove its sense of dread and darkness all the way through to the final moments, as the film ends with the reveal that Sarah, the last survivor of the cave, only dreamed that she'd escaped, and was in reality still sitting in the dark, imagining her dead daughter sitting across from her. By the time the US release was looming, audiences had given feedback saying they found the ending too bleak, and distributor Lionsgate asked for a change. So Marshall cut the final minute of the film, allowing Sarah to escape the cave for real. It might be hard to believe now, but First Blood was originally supposed to be a one-and-done affair, because John Rambo was originally supposed to die. Yes, Sylvester Stallone's tortured Vietnam veteran, who became synonymous with action movie juggernauts in the 1980s, was originally going to get killed at the end of his first and only movie. But that's what happens in David Morrell's novel on which the film is based. It's also what happened in the first version of Ted Koschev's film, which he saw as a suicide mission that would end with Rambo killing himself. From the moment he joined the production, Stallone felt the suicide ending for Rambo was too excessive and pitched an alternate ending that Koschev ultimately shot on the same day as his original ending. By the time the film ended up with Orion Pictures, the distributor had the idea to run a test screening with the original ending, just to see what would happen. Koschev told Entertainment Weekly, "The test audience were all unanimous. They all said, in different words, this is the best action film I've ever seen, but the ending is horrible." Rollerball sounds like the kind of film that might work well now. Director John McTiernan, who helped give birth to the action movie as we know it, set out to remake a cult classic from director Norman Jewison about an ultra-brutal futuristic sport.
The whole world will be watching because this is your year.
The 2001 remake of Rollerball seemed to be in trouble from the beginning, but McTiernan drew internet ire for opting to change the futuristic setting of the original film and ditching the first script. Then came test screenings in the spring of 2001. The response was terrible, thanks in no small part to an extremely negative review from Ain't It Cool News, and the studio went into damage control mode. The release date was pushed to 2002. McTiernan conducted 2 weeks of reshoots to refine certain scenes, and the studio mandated that the film be cut to make a PG-13 rating, hoping younger audiences would respond to it. This meant all of the nudity and a good deal of the violence were toned down. Rollerball was ultimately a critical and commercial failure. Sometimes test audiences are extremely specific with what they want. This was the case with The Lovely Bones, Peter Jackson's 2009 adaptation of Alice Sebold's best-selling novel. Jackson told Reuters that test audiences had a lot to say about one of the film's key ending points. The specific complaint was regarding the death of the child killer Mr. Harvey, who is killed as he is in Sebold's novel, when an icicle hits him on the shoulder and causes him to fall down into a ravine. Audiences were happy to see Harvey die, but they felt his death was too quick. So Jackson went back to the cutting room and added more suffering. In the final film, we see Harvey's full fall to his death, complete with bone-crushing bounces and facial lacerations. It's now considered one of Martin Scorsese's best, but members of the original test screening audience for Goodfellas walked out in disgust. The reactions were instant and visceral, with several people leaving in the opening moments of the film as Tommy DeVito violently stabs Billy Batts to death. Studio executives were rattled. Speaking with Entertainment Weekly in 2019, Scorsese reflected on the test screening process, saying, "I'm in the process of making the film. I screen it for some people. They go, maybe you don't need that, and maybe I do things or maybe not." Following the Goodfellas screening, Scorsese began tweaking the movie's edit. Working directly with editor Thelma Schoonmaker, the two determined precisely how many stab wounds the Bat's character could sustain on film before it became gratuitous. Not all screening comment cards resulted in cuts to the film, however. Scorsese revealed that while the violence was too much for viewers, they loved Scorsese's real-life mother in the role of Mrs. DeVito, Tommy's mother. Their feedback saved the heartwarming sequence from the cutting room floor. And the final result is one of the greatest gangster movies of all time.
That's what I settle down almost every night, but then in the morning I'm free. I love you. I want to be with you.
Anchorman, the legend of Ron Burgundy, has become a modern comedy classic, but the original plot was received so poorly by test audiences that it had to be completely reshot. The retooling left several big-name comic actors on the cutting room floor, like Maya Rudolph, Stephen Root, Amy Poehler, and Justin Long. There was even a role for rap legend Chuck D that had to be abandoned. Will Ferrell superfans need not fret, however, as all the unused footage from the feature film, mostly involving a terrorist group called the Alarm Clock, was repurposed into a so-called lost film called Wake Up, Ron Burgundy. Initially released as its own direct-to-DVD feature, it's now included as an extra on the unrated Rich Mahogany Edition Blu-ray. The theatrical release, of course, became a huge hit. Anchorman earned over $90 million at the box office and has a rating of 86% with audiences on Rotten Tomatoes. But beyond the numbers, it became what its titular character is known as, a legend.
If you want to throw down in fisticuffs, fine. I've got Jack Johnson and Tom O'Leary waiting for you, right here.
Thor may be the star of his own series of movies in the MCU, but Loki is just as beloved. In fact, Loki is easily the most popular villain/anti-hero of the multiverse. with a redemption arc in Thor Ragnarok and his own extremely popular series on Disney+. Imagine then if Loki had truly died at the end of Thor: The Dark World as originally intended. Tom Hiddleston revealed on the Empire Film podcast that Loki's death in Thor: The Dark World was meant to stick, but that test screening audiences rejected the idea. Naturally, it makes sense that fans wouldn't trust any Loki death scene, as the notorious trickster character is known for his misleading illusions. Indeed, moments earlier in Thor: The Dark World, the character makes it look like he cuts off his brother's hand in a moment of betrayal. Plus, Loki's no stranger to faking his death, as he does at the end of the first Thor. It's therefore fitting that the sly adopted Asgardian pulls another fast one. Loki's The Dark World death was meant to serve as a redemption arc for the mischievous villain. While it can be said that undermining that intention in The Dark World leaves the middle of the film with no real stakes, it ultimately allows Loki to serve a much greater purpose and enjoy a much more satisfying redemption in Thor Ragnarok and beyond.